I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is my life living in Leon, Nicaragua. We got some beautiful light today. We got bright blue skies with these white puffy clouds, but there's like shade on us. So we have beautiful diffuse light with gorgeous blue skies. We're just gonna swing this around. You gotta see. This is what we look at when we're doing the videos. It's just gorgeous out here, but I need the light on my face so we can do it anyway. Today, I had a viewer ask about where they could do some searching because they know not to use real estate agents, but they're looking at San Juan del Sur because their son is going to be moving to the area and is needing some way to offset his costs, right? He needs to have some kind of income. And so they're looking at buying an apartment or a home potentially someplace and maybe a business. And this sounds like about the most dangerous thing we could possibly imagine. So we want to talk about this in the light of a few videos we've done recently so we can put those together and explain exactly what the risks would be here. And we're going to get to that right after the bump. So this is the perfect confluence of two things that we said recently. One, about 3 weeks ago, I think, we did a video about how you can't start a business in Nicaragua to attempt to offset your cost of living. It does not work that way. It's not absolutely impossible, but it is for all intents and purposes impossible. It's certainly implausible. So that's the first thing. The entire concept anywhere in the world is not going to make sense. But people do want to do it because they imagine that buying a business somehow offsets cost of living. That doesn't work that way, even in the United States, most of the time. That is the exception, not the rule. So it's something you have to be aware of. Now, if you're doing a little side hustle from home and you're like working a day job and you're doing a little bit of extra thing that you only put time into when it makes sense, that's different. That can make money because it's not taking up your time for your job, but that it is taking away from your time to, I don't know, watch TV or whatever. But if you are giving up your actual career and putting money into something you have to invest into, and that thing is not paying for your time, you're losing money. So you need to be super careful about this, and you're taking away your ability to pay for things some other way. So both the investment is at risk and your time is at risk. Obviously, you can do things to mitigate these things, but you can't generally overcome enough to actually make you money. And that's the first thing. The second thing, we talked about why you never buy an existing business, and they were looking for listings or how you could find out about businesses for sale. Of course, even if you decide to do the first thing, which we can't possibly warn you enough about, and I mean that. We've done so much warning about this, and yet it is the second most common thing. First thing is buying a house, right, which is absolutely reckless and a terrible idea under normal circumstances, especially if we're talking about someone. One, if you're looking at San Juan del Sur, you need to be so much more cautious about everything. Everything becomes more risky when you're adding San Juan del Sur. Second, if you're looking at someone who's young and they're coming down and they're not 100% sure that this is the house that they want to have for the rest of their lives, boom, done. Never look at buying a house. I cannot possibly warn enough about buying a house in a place with no liquidity on the market if you aren't completely dedicated to living in that house forever, or owning it and renting it out forever, or keeping it for because you potentially can't sell it. Sure, almost everyone can unload a house within 20 years, but 20 years must be your assumption. You might get lucky. You might take a loss and sell it earlier. Things might change. You might be able to sell it earlier, but the assumption that we've worked off of for decades holds true. You must be prepared to hold on for 20 years to have any reasonable assurance of getting a decent price. And the problem is, if you hold on for 20 years trying to sell, chances are you're losing all that time because you've got to maintain it, you've got to protect it, you've got to secure it. And clearly you don't want to live in it. So either you're stuck living in a house you don't want, or you're not living in a house you're paying for. In either case, your financial hit is probably dramatic. Every place I know that's had to hold out for 20 years has lost massive percentages, 20, 50%, the value of their property by being stuck holding on to it for so long. In some, they've lost more than 100% the value of the property. And that's easy to do some math on. If you put $100,000 into a house, you don't live in it, it costs you nothing, it just sits there, and you sell it after 10 years for $100,000. You have a problem because that $100,000 having gone into a standard, by-the-book investment fund that just holds on to value is going to double. You're going to have $200,000 at the end of that 10 years instead of $100,000. So your house has cost you 100% of its value under that circumstance. If we're looking at going to 20 years and the same thing happens, you buy a house for $100,000, you sell it for $100,000 after 20 years, and you would have had that money sitting in that investment account. It could have been worth $400,000. You've lost the value of the house 4 times over during that 20 years. So you need to really be careful when you're looking at these numbers. It's really easy to get salespeople. The scammy, slimy real estate agents are going to be like, $100,000 held its value, talking about protecting your money. It didn't even protect your money against inflation, let alone market baseline. So you have lost considerably. Every single person you will talk to makes money or is some way incentivized to convince you to screw yourself over. Because let's face it, we all play in a zero-sum game in the global economy, and we need to encourage other people to be financial losers so that we have a better chance of being a financial winner. So everybody is going to be out to scam you on this, even if it's casually, they don't think about it. It's just in the back of their minds, oh, you're going to lose money, that's good for me. You're not going to make the money, that's good for me. You're going to do a transaction with me and I'm going to get paid for it, wow, that's good for me, right? Everybody is one way or another incentivized to get you to do the wrong thing. So watch out for that. There's very few people who are, 1, willing to be honest, and 2, so far disconnected from your financial situation that you could possibly talk to that is willing to give you honest advice. So you need to be really, really, really cautious, because if you talk to anyone, as this person knows, right, if they talk to a real estate agent, they're going to get bad advice, right? But it's more than that. The idea that you even want a house, the idea that you would want to buy a business, also coming from a dangerous perspective. So that's the first thing. So we talked about that investing in a business just anywhere in the country, no matter how boring that business is unlikely to be able to make enough to pay for your time going into it. You may make a few dollars, but not enough to pay for the time and effort that you put in, and almost certainly any investment you put in is going to be lost. Not guaranteed, but really likely, at least eroded, right? So that's a negative investment. So making a negative investment that doesn't pay your bills, that's a problem. Right? We have 2 ways to make money on an investment. One is the investment itself growing. We hope that then this is how you measure success. It's got to match if you would put the money into something else. And so how do you plan on having a business that's going to match that 9% growth that we expect from North America from just blind investments that you can still do, right? You're not giving that up by moving to Nicaragua. So if you're not doing that, it means you have either a desire to put your money into Nicaragua greater than your desire to make money, or you believe you have a business plan that is going to solidly beat the 9% mark over time. On average. And so how are you planning on doing that? That's the first question to answer, because I don't know anyone who's able to do that here. In theory, it can be done, but the only people I know who've done it did it in the past. They can't do it again, right? They did it during a different economic climate, and only, right, you have to think about that. We see these winners from 20, 30 years ago, right? Oh, I came in, I invested, 20 years later, I'm doing great. Yes, of course they are, because thousands, tens of thousands of people came in and invested 20, 30 years ago. 9,990 of them went out of business and lost everything. The 10 you still talk to today are the survivors. After decades, they've consumed the losses from so many of those other businesses. Yes, somebody in 1,000 people is going to be a winner and actually make some money and actually beat that 9% number. But are you really thinking you're going to be that 0.1%? Probably not. But if you go talk to people who've been around for a long time, only the 0.1% is left. So of course you're getting good stories of success, but that doesn't mean that they had good chances of success. They got lucky, and they did it over a big period of time. You don't have that period of time. You want to make money now, not in 30 years. So we need to look at that very carefully, that you just don't see that going on in the country. You don't see people coming in and getting that return from pure investment. So that's a loss if you don't do that. Right now you have to look at, could you make that company for the purpose of giving yourself a job so you can work at it? Yes, but like we talk about, anything that you're going to hire yourself to work at, one, potentially puts you into some legal risk, not necessarily, but generally. So you want to be a little bit careful on that. If you're going and starting a barbershop and you're going to work as the barber and you're the only one there, some other barber in town is going to call you in and say, that person doesn't have a work permit and they're acting as an employee, and then they're going to investigate and you're going to be in trouble. So you don't want to do anything where someone has an incentive to call you in. And trust me, if you do a business that a Nicaraguan could do, everyone's got an incentive to call you in. And so you need to do a lot to be able to legally be allowed to work. You have to have big investments, wait a long time to get your paperwork. You have tons of overhead, and then you've got to pay yourself taxes, and those taxes hit hard, and suddenly you're back to how would you make money? You've got to maintain that 9%, or you can't measure your salary, right? We've done a bunch of studies on this. So in theory, you're going to create this job where you're going to work and make a salary, but any Nicaraguan could do that job probably better because they know the market, they have experience, whatever, than this person. And they can do it, and they're happy to do it at a fraction of the cost. They don't need to make the same amount of money because their cost of living is lower. Their knowledge of the market is lower, their access to other things is lower. They're, so you're up against someone who would do this job for $300 a month, maybe $600 a month, at most $1,000 a month. How are you going to pay yourself significantly after the company covers its investment, just to make sure it's not losing its investment? How are you going to pay yourself that much money when all of your competitors, whatever it is, could pay a Nicaraguan $300, $400 a month to do that and create a job, right? If you're creating jobs, you're making the country happy. If you're not creating jobs, you're either neutral or possibly negative. So you need to think about all those things. You got a lot of factors to put in. That doesn't mean you can't have a company here that isn't creating jobs. You can, for sure. But it's not going to get you any favors. It's not like they're going to come down and be like, oh, we're going to give you citizenship or anything because you're not creating jobs. It's the one thing that they're really measuring, right? Are you a problem? Assuming not, then are you creating jobs? These are basically, it's more complex than that, but those are the big factors. So if you want to get that permanent residency, you want to head towards citizenship, anything, if someone's young and if you're investing in a business, you've got to be 100% dedicated to this is where you are forever, right? Now, I invest in businesses here. I'm in. Right? I live in Nicaragua. This is my home. This is my country. I live here. So that I'm making an investment that I assume will go for the rest of my life, and I don't have the ability, or I likely don't have the ability to cash out on, is absolutely fine because I have no plans on cashing out. I don't need a fallback plan. Most people, especially young people, need fallback plans. Not that Nicaragua is not a great place for them, but it shouldn't be that they're making at 20, 25 years old, a dedication that they don't have the option to get out and go somewhere else. Should they meet someone, have a change in life plans, have a different career goal, just something change in their lives, that's awfully young to be locking yourself in. And we're not saying don't move to Nicaragua. We're saying don't do risky financial things that only make sense if you're happy to lock in for forever, right? So, and then the other factors, so those are the initial factors, like there's no way this is going to financially make sense. And then we said San Juan del Sur specifically is currently going under. Business after business is collapsing. The people who have, and we just released this video, right? The people who have the most years, the people who have the best investment situation, the people who are in the best possible shape are closing their businesses because they're not making enough money to justify. They're not making that 9%. They're losing money. Because if you're making more than that, you would keep it open. You would just take on investors if you needed more money. You can't get investors because you're not beating that 9%. If you can show you're getting 11%, people will invest. I'll invest. Right? Like that's amazing if you can provide those kinds of returns. So if you're not providing those returns, your business is losing money. Right? If you're below that 9% average, you're losing your investment. It's eroding away. And so you need to be really wary. How could you start a business today and compete against these places that are going out of business, that have been losing money presumably for decades, and they know the market and they already paid their dues and they already have the connections and they already know the processes? You are going to have, even if you don't buy a business, so much extra overhead to start up a new one. And then if you're thinking about buying one of these failed businesses, you have all that learning curve, all that overhead of starting a new business, plus all of the risk that comes with buying an old one, plus all the things you may not know to do. Like I could buy a business here and I know immediately to make sure I have a contract that says all the employees are liquidated, all kinds of legal liabilities are taken care of, and I still wouldn't do it. But if you're new, you're much more likely, if you're out there looking for a business, that means you haven't thought through the risks. If you know the risks of buying a business, you don't look for them. It's just out of the question. So when you're doing this, you're so likely to mistake something like not getting the contract to have all the liquidations in place. You could be buying a business for $100,000 and carry $50,000 of liabilities that are not on the books anywhere. And they're obvious to an accountant, but if you don't have those people, if you don't have trusted people in place and you don't know what to look for, suddenly people are like, you didn't know about liquidations? Of course, look, you have employees. Where did you think the money was at? You don't see a pension fund, do you? So clearly it has to come out of your pocket. Wait, I just spent $100,000. I have to spend another $50,000 just to cover liabilities that came with this? Yup. Because that's how buying a business works. And business people who do this all the time are used to that. But if you're new to the market and new to buying businesses, these are things that people are often surprised by. And when you're doing something like this, it's not the time to be surprised, especially if your goal is to somehow pay your bills or offset your cost of living. Those are all things that just don't go together. Right? You need a game plan for how you're going to survive financially. None of these cover that, right? These are all things that people with lots of excess funds decide to do because it's fun or they think they have some major advantage. And that's key. I'm going to do a video about that as well. I think that's a good one. But this real idea, when we're talking about people like me who are investing in the country, and I'm 100% in, this is my country for the long haul. I'm not planning on going anywhere. I've put in 10 years of research at this point, 5 years of research before I moved. And before I moved permanently, I should say, I spent some time living here before I came down. Even with all of that, very importantly, the people like me who are doing that are either retirees with plenty of funds and they think it's a good way to spend their retirement. And in some cases, they're like, I know I'm going to lose money versus some other things, but it gives me something to keep myself occupied and it's fun. And if I run a bar or restaurant, my friends come over and hang out. There's lots of reasons that people make it make sense that are not financial. That's great. Or they're people like me who are actively working elsewhere and have a source of income outside of the country. And my investments in the country are mostly a way to help me be a part of my community. We got an ant crawling around on the lens there. Help me be a part of the community, or for me to help grow my community, protect the community that I live in, be a positive impact to it. And if it makes some money, that would be fantastic. But realistically, I know that it's probably going to lose. And I'm able to do so because I have an outside continuous source of income that's propping those things up and allowing me to keep them open, even if they're losing money. Now, at some point, they lose so much money that we change course. But the idea that we have to make money off of them doesn't exist for us. So when we're doing stuff, you can't look at people, anyone that you're looking at and saying, oh, this person's successful, they kept this business open for a while. You have to assume that they are in a position where they're okay losing money for forever. Everyone I know who has businesses here that are foreign is in that position of minimizing losses, not making extra money. Nobody's offsetting their cost of living. They're all attacking their cost of living. We're all damaging our monthly expenses, not assisting them. Right? That's got to be really clear. By having a business here, almost everyone who does so has less financial stability, not more. People get it in their head, like bundling that we talked about in another video recently, that simply by having a business, you're in a stronger position. That is not the case. You're in a weaker position, almost guaranteed, practically guaranteed. You must assume that if you buy a business or even just start a new business, that you will lose money. If you start a business that has no overhead, it's just some free time, you spend $100, that's it, sure. Take a gamble and have some fun. That's great. Neat little way to keep yourself busy. But if you're looking at how you're going to survive, you've got, for our viewer, it was his son that's looking at coming. How is he going to pay his bills and be able to live? He's going to, without exception, there's only two ways. You are independently wealthy and none of this matters, or you are going to work online for a job, either your own company in North America, or you're going to work for a company in North America online. You're going to make great money and you're going to be able to spend it in paradise and live like a king. You can do that, or you can throw your financial security and future away by trying to invest in a business here that at best is going to struggle to avoid eroding your investment away and is unlikely to ever pay you enough to live anywhere close to how you could have lived if you had just worked online. Theoretically, you could end up in a position where your money is kind of treading water and you are paying yourself like a Nicaraguan and making a few dollars at the end of the day. Overall, you're losing. There's ways you could have put your money very simply and worked less and made more. But some people love the challenge, but assume that is a 1 in 100%. That is 1% of businesses are going to get into that treading water and it's kind of fun sort of situation. Everyone else is just losing money. That 1 in 1,000 that makes money is not going to be you. It just isn't. You got to be realistic. If you're that person, you are coming in with a brilliant idea that no one else has thought of. You're somehow leveraging the market, leveraging your access to things on the outside, and still getting very lucky. But if you're doing anything that anyone else has done before, anything that anyone else has thought of, you're going to lose. That's a guarantee. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ScottAllenMiller, or you can join our community here or on buymeacoffee.com. We've got join buttons that help you give just a little bit every month. And of course, watching another video or 10 does a lot to help the channel. So please let them run in the background, play them on another computer, call up some friends and have them watch the show. All that stuff really helps. Get in the comments and say hello, ask your questions there. You can also send in a video of yourself. All the information is in the show notes. Love it when people send in videos. That's so much fun. I know I'm behind on some. I am getting to them. I'm backlogged terribly. I'm getting caught up. And I will see all of you tomorrow.